I stood there, watching the smile slowly spread across my manager's face. It wasn't a happy smile, it was a vicious, gleeful smirk, the kind that promised nothing but pain. He was staring at me, but his words were for the director. "We'll find a professional production house to finish her work." That one word, professional, hung in the air like a knife. It was a verbal stab, a final blow to my already bruised ego. My stomach had been in knots ever since I walked into that office, but in that moment, something inside me snapped. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a new, cold resolve. A light bulb went off in my head, a single, brilliant spark in a storm of humiliation. He wanted to replace me with a professional production house? Fine. But he was about to learn a very expensive lesson about what happens when you underestimate a one-woman army. We've all been there. A boss who doesn't see your worth. A colleague who stabs you in the back. That burning, desperate need to get even. If you've ever fantasized about serving up a dish of cold, hard revenge, then hit that like button, subscribe, and prepare for one of the most deeply satisfying stories you'll ever hear. This is the story of how I took a firing and turned it into a year's salary, all while on vacation. Let's go back. It's the early 2010s, a time when YouTube was still finding its feet, and the term content creator was more of a hopeful aspiration than a career. I was fresh-faced, hungry, and just happy to have a gig. The job? Video content creator for a university's brand new YouTube channel. The pay was low, around $2,200 a month, but it felt like a golden ticket. This was my chance to prove myself, to build something from the ground up. The first few days were a blur of excitement. I met my new manager, a man who seemed kind, if a little, intense. He gave me my KPI, a seemingly impossible goal of 85 videos in a single year. That's more than one video every 5 days, for 52 weeks straight. For a one-woman team, with no help and no budget for outsourcing, it was insane. I tried to raise my concerns. I laid out the math for him, trying to explain that a single video involved scripting, producing, casting, shooting, composing music, everything, all by myself. But he just smiled that same polite yet insincere smile. "Just give it a try," he said. "If the videos are good, the quantity won't be what I focus on." I took him at his word. The problem was, I had no idea what kind of person he really was. For the first month, things were fine. I poured my heart into the work, even though their equipment was a joke. The cameras were so old they couldn't even handle 720p footage without overheating, and the computers chugged just trying to render a simple edit. I ended up bringing in my own gear, my own software, anything to get the job done. I was working 12-hour days, often 6 days a week, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to succeed. And then, he found out. I was a smoker. One of my colleagues later did a facepalm when I told them. "He hates smokers," they whispered to me. "He's tried to get them all fired." It was like a switch flipped. The polite smiles and encouraging words vanished overnight. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. He started nitpicking my every move. He'd sniff the air when I walked in, making a face like I reeked of cigarettes. 5 minutes late, even after putting in 4 hours of overtime that same day? He'd pounce. Not reachable during my lunch break? I was suddenly an unreliable employee. The constant barrage of negativity was exhausting. I felt a tight coil of tension in my chest every time I saw him. I tried to just keep my head down, to let my work speak for itself. The videos I was putting out were good, really good. They were actually generating more views than anything the university's YouTube page had ever seen. I knew I was doing a great job, despite the impossible odds and the constant harassment. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was. 5 months into the job, the hammer fell. I was called into the director's office. The second I saw my manager sitting there, a cold dread washed over me. He had his displeased but gleeful face on, the perfect mask of concern layered over a truly ugly satisfaction. I felt my stomach drop straight to my shoes. The director, a serious, no-nonsense woman, looked at me with a frown. "We've heard you're falling behind on your work," she said. "It's already halfway through the year, and you've only completed 30 out of your 85 videos." My mind raced. 30 videos in 5 months was a superhuman effort for a one-woman team. I tried to explain. I told her I was working over 60 hours a week. I told her the videos were bringing in huge views. I reminded her of my manager's promise, that quality was more important than quantity. The director just waved her hand dismissively. "The KPI is 85 videos. Your numbers are less than half. We feel it's prudent to cut the cord now." I was stunned. The injustice of it all was a physical blow. I had sacrificed everything for this job, and they were tossing me aside like yesterday's garbage. I felt a hot, furious lump form in my throat. "How are you going to meet the KPI if you fire me?" I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. My manager let out a cold snort. The sound was like a dagger. "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director gave him a strange look, like a flicker of doubt had just passed between them, but she nodded in agreement. "Don't you worry. Manager will get the job done." And that was it. That was the moment. The cold dread and hot anger in my stomach solidified into something else entirely, a plan. They were going to use my contacts? The database of production houses I had painstakingly compiled as part of my job? A wave of icy calm washed over me, a stillness I hadn't felt in months. I had been their little one-woman content factory, and now that they had milked me for all I was worth, they were just going to toss me aside and use the tools I built for them. Not on my watch. As the content professional in the office, I was the only one with access to that database. My manager, who had no contacts in the production industry, would have to rely entirely on my list. So I went back to my desk, my mind racing a mile a minute. I felt a dangerous, thrilling sense of power. I opened up the spreadsheet. I deleted every contact number. Scrambled every email address. Every single one, that is, except for one. I had a friend who was a junior director at a local production house. Not a small-time operation, but a legitimate, growing company. I called him from my car in the parking lot, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and adrenaline. I laid it all out for him. They had fired me, they needed 55 more videos in 6 months, and they were going to be looking for a production house immediately. And here was my plan. I told him this was a win-win for both of us. His company would get a massive contract, a huge stream of business that would put him on the fast track to a full director position. And I would get a standard finder's fee. A 15% cut of the deal. He didn't even hesitate. He was in. He immediately put me on the phone with his general manager, who nearly choked when I explained the size of the project. A high 6-figure payout for 6 months of work? They drew up a contract on the spot. I had given them a metaphorical, step-by-step playbook on how to win the job. And the rest, as they say, is history. As it turned out, my friend's production house was the perfect fit. They had somehow magically figured out the exact tone and style of the university's content. They knew what themes the director wanted to feature, what colors the brand preferred, what kind of stories they wanted to tell. My former boss and the director were in awe. They signed the contract on the spot. Now, a professional production house in the 2010s was not cheap. My measly $2,200 salary was nothing compared to their rates. They had a full team, a producer, a director of photography, a gaffer, a sound person, editors, production assistants, specialized people for every single function. This meant they could churn out a video in 2 to 3 days. They produced the remaining 55 videos in just 4 months. The cost? Over 100 months of my original salary. And while they were doing that, I was sitting back and collecting my healthy 15% finder's fee. It was about 15 months of my salary, a year's worth of pay for a few hours of planning and a single phone call. The money was great. It allowed me to pay for a much-needed holiday and save the rest to further my studies at a respected film school overseas. I thought that was it. My revenge was complete. I had gotten back at my old bosses and had secured my financial future. But a few months later, while I was vacationing in Bali, my phone rang. It was my old colleague, the same one who had facepalmed when I told her my manager hated smokers. Her voice was low, and I could hear the excitement in it. She told me that my old manager had been fired. The director had been given a massive verbal blasting by the chancellor himself. The content creation project I was hired for had a total budget of only about a year and a half of my salary. My former manager, in his desperate, petty quest to prove that he could get the job done, had thrown caution to the wind. He had approved the massive, over 10 times budget spend without getting consent from the director. That beautiful, cold smirking face of his was now gone, replaced by the reality of being jobless and humiliated. My former manager had dug his own grave, and I was just the one who gave him the shovel. And just like that, I had not only gotten a year's pay and a trip to Bali, but I had also secured my friend a super-fast promotion to a full director and gotten a perfectly executed, deeply satisfying revenge on the two people who thought they could just discard me. It just goes to show you, sometimes the best revenge isn't about making a scene or proving a point. It's about being smart. It's about leveraging the very tools they tried to use against you. It's about sitting back and letting their own incompetence become their downfall. If this story gave you the chills, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed or carried out? And of course, subscribe for more stories just like this.